The weather.
Okay. That's the excuse we'll use. Yeah, welcome to the Indie the Obscure podcast. Today we are doing a special episode. We are going to be highlighting the Dread X collection. When is it? Later this week?
I want to say it's May 3rd. I want to say it comes out on Tuesday. This upcoming
Mm,
hey,
I guess.
yeah,
Yeah, when this episode airs, it should be tomorrow.
yeah.
Dread X 5 is coming out, which Dread X, from my understanding, I've watched a little bit. I've watched a little bit of you play and other people play, but this is going to be a little bit more of a you focused episode because you are a big fan of the Dread X collection, and
Big old Dread X fan. Big Dread X
yeah,
fan.
been following a little bit of the lore and stuff like that, and I have a little bit of an understanding. I've watched your stream. I've watched a couple other streams of people playing it, but we're gonna go ahead and explore a little bit more about the games and the games that have come from the games and the games within the games that are the Dread X collection. Because from my understanding, it's a very meta situation where it's things within things that are also the same things as the other things that were inside of things.
Yes, that I
That all made sense.
100%.
Don't sass me.
It was perfect sense. Everything made amazing sense.
It might have been nonsense, but it was sense.
There was some sense. I don't think it was nonsense. It was some sense. But yes, yeah,
Mm.
to piggyback off that, yeah, the Dread X collections. So Dread XP is a publisher of horror games, and they have created these things known as the Dread X collections, where they essentially build almost like a game launcher that has its own like narrative in it, like an overarching like meta situation. And what you have to do is, in order to progress the storyline, you go into the Dread X collection launcher essentially and play these individual games, and as you do, it starts to proceed to like build up the story. And when it first started, I want to say it was 10 devs, and they only had 7 days to get their little like their smaller games together and ready to go. Which, as the time has gone, they've changed the number of devs, they've altered how many days it takes to actually get them put out and stuff like that. But yeah, that's essentially the thing. It's almost like a game jam situation that you see, like, say, on itch.io, where it's almost like a game jam, but built within another game with an overarching storyline.
Yeah. So, one of my first questions with this is, so the idea behind this, or behind all these games. So we're coming up on the 5th one. Are they all tied together, or are they just sort of like individual stories that you sort of play through for the stories?
So in terms of like, say, 1 through 3, because 4 was actually titled The Hunt. It wasn't numbered, but they've officially labeled it as 4 because 5 is the one getting ready to come out. In 1 through 3, while the individual games themselves within don't necessarily tie in together, there'll be like some kind of theme, like a theme for them. But the first 3 games, their overarching meta actually progressively turns into a story. So it starts out in Dread X1, then develops further into Dread X2, and then into Dread X3. However, The Hunt, Dread X4, has a completely different story. So The Hunt, I'll go ahead and tell you what it was about, because the first 3, it would take a while to kind of explain how it all goes. But The Hunt was really cool because The Hunt actually took place, it reminded me a lot of John Carpenter's The Thing, because a lot of it took place on like an Antarctic base. And as you're unlocking more and more of this game, you're finding out that there's like something locked up somewhere that you're trying to discover. And you find out it's like this big monster that kind of killed everybody on this base, and you have to try to survive kind of situation. And as you can tell, it also still stuck with the theme of having all of the games based around something, because it's called Dread X The Hunt. And the hunt aspect of it is that almost all of them were like a first-person shooter-esque, but they were all done from the first-person perspective, although not all of them were actual shooters.
Mm. I know one thing I always thought was really interesting, at least when I've seen you play, is the I think it was Dread X2 maybe, that there was always something built into it, like a puzzle or something like that, that you had to complete these mini game, or I want to say mini games, but the actual games within the game. You had to complete these games to collect things to unlock other things. Like, there was always like some sort of meta built into it, or there's always some sort of like, you had to play the mini games to progress a story. It was never, even though like in on paper it could sound almost like a Mario Party type situation. It was never like that. It was more of a more of like trying to these were to unlock clues or something like that. What was some of the better moments or like some of the better unlock puzzles and stuff like that? Like what were your thoughts on those? What were some of your thoughts on like some of those puzzles to unlock things?
So the Dread X2 probably had the cooler of the puzzle situation, because like
Mm,
3, it was they were all like in this cemetery, and you just went and played the individual ones, but you did progress the storyline having to figure stuff out. However, Dread X2 really nailed this for me, because you're in this mansion, like the game launcher itself, like the Dread X overarching story, it takes place in this mansion, this old abandoned one, and you're going in this room, and there are these VHS tapes that you have to unlock, and the VHS tapes, whenever you plug one in, it opens one of the games. And what was really cool about it was in it, whenever you needed to get a key to unlock a new one, you had to go solve a puzzle within the actual like mansion. And the coolest one, in my opinion, of that, because it had the best one. Dread X2 had the best one in terms of like puzzle solving and how it made it work. And the coolest puzzle they had was actually, there was a deal that mentioned something about a haircut, I believe, a haircut and a shave, and it was from like the old dun 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 dun, and you had to play that on the piano. And it was
hmm
like, it was pretty vague. It took me a little bit to figure out, but you had to play that on the piano. And when you did, it unlocked one of your keys. Now, granted, whenever you unlocked a key, you could go play whichever game you wanted that you haven't unlocked yet. So you didn't have to do them in a specific order, which is kind of cool. So it's like if you had one that you're like, okay, I know this dev, I want to play this game first, you could pick that game to play first. You wouldn't have to, you know, basically
You would have
go
to beat
through to get to it.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to beat the whole game. You wouldn't have to beat the whole game to get to what you wanted to play. If there was something that you just specifically wanted to play, you could have just grabbed that one.
Right, right. And that's what like I said, Dread X2 probably had my favorite in terms of those, like being able to solve the puzzles to unlock the different games within. And as you did, of course, it progressed the storyline further and further. I do remember in
Mhm.
Dread X2 there was like a comic book in it as well. Like you unlocked different pieces of this comic book that told an entire story. That was pretty cool because it had like actual like voiceover stuff as well. So it was really cool. Dread X2 was the first one I actually played. And full disclosure, I haven't actually played the first one, but I did watch our good friend the Chocolad play it in its entirety on his Twitch channel. And so that was my experience with Dread X1. So Dread X2 was the first one I actually played through. And I don't think there's like a little bit of a bias there due to the fact that it was the first one. I genuinely do believe that it had kind of the cooler built around storyline.
Yeah, the coolest system
Mm-hmm.
as far as yeah, okay. So what would you say as far as just DreadX in general? Which one would be your favorite? So two had like the best
The best puzzles.
story area. Yeah, the best puzzles and story area. Which one would you say, like as a collection, was the best?
My favorite was Dread X The Hunt, which was the fourth one. Now, granted, there was more that went into the Hunt. The Hunt, it had less devs. There were only 7 games as opposed to 12, which is what 2 had. And then, or no, 12 is what 3 had, and I believe 10 was how many both 1 and 2 had. I'll double back on that. But they also gave them like a lot more time to build these games in terms
hmm
of how much time they built around them, because the first one was done in 7 days, and I think the second and third one were done in 10, and then Hunt was done in 20. So they got 20 days to build these, which I believe allowed for a lot of tightening up and being able to ensure that there were really good optimized games, so there wouldn't have to be a whole lot of patching. Because you got to think, whenever they have to patch something in this, the devs from the individual teams are having to come in and try to patch their game, and so it kind of I would assume it could create a bit of a messy situation there. So it was pretty great. There weren't near as many like patches out the gate for the Hunt, so that I think played a part.
Yeah, I could definitely see. I mean, they almost had 3 times as long to work on the games. That would definitely make a big difference.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
What were some of your what were some of your like key standout games? Like in I would say I guess starting out, like what were your key like standout games in each in each Dread X? So if somebody were to go out and pick up the 4 Dread X's like per uh per set, which one would you say like, oh, you need to play this one, you need to play this one? Like, what were the really good ones?
So on Dread X1 of the, like I said, I watched all those. I didn't play them myself, but there were actually two in it that stood out to me more than any others. One of them was Hand of Doom, which was a wizard casting game that was made by Torpilduke, who has made a few different games in the collections. And then Carthank, which this one may be a little biased because it's Scythe dev team that made that, and I have a relationship with Scythe dev team, but it was actually really good. I will say that going into 2, however, I'll be brutally honest about that. To the End of Days wasn't in my top list, and it was made by the same dev team. The voice acting was a little spotty, but it was like cheesy, so it was funny. It was like cheesy in a good way, but it didn't really hold up as well, in my opinion, as Carthank did. But in 2, Sucker for Love stood out because it kind of like blew the whole thing out. It was like not really. It didn't feel like a horror game because Sucker for Love, for those of you who don't know, is a Cthulhu like Lovecraftian dating sim, because the whole theme of Dread X2 was love crafting. And Sucker for Love, yeah, Lynetta was her name, but she had like the tentacles like Cthulhu and everything. It was seriously like a dating sim. It was pretty funny. And then of course everybody that's played 2 knows Squirrel Stapler. Squirrel Stapler is made by, right? Yeah, exactly. So the dev that I'll go ahead and go back real quick to Sucker for Love. The dev that made that was I believe Akabaka is their name. They also made a game called Chromatos that's really good. But there's more to talk about on Sucker for Love later. David Zemansky made Squirrel Stapler, and David Zemansky is known primarily for Dusk, which is a pretty recognizable name in the indie community. It's like, I want to say it's considered a boomer shooter. And it was Squirrel Stapler. You play this man that you wake up in a cabin and there's a rotting corpse, like skinless corpse, hanging from your wall with a note that just says, "I want my wife to be as beautiful as the squirrel of the wood. Therefore, I will cover her in the squirrel of the wood." So you go out of your cabin and you begin hunting, and you start shooting squirrels. And as you're shooting these squirrels, you collect a certain amount. It tells you how many to collect. You collect a certain amount, and you take them back, and you literally staple them to your dead wife. It is called Squirrel Stapler, and it is exactly that. I won't spoil the big ending, because there is a big ending, but as you progress through, you start getting like ghost squirrels, these giant mutated squirrels that explode, that come after you, all kinds of crap that you have to kill before the big reveal finale. And I know there are going to be some people that haven't played that out there.
Mm-hmm.
You need to. It's an experience. It is an experience, to say the least.
I will say I did not like. I think I was doing something. I think I watched you play most of 2, and I think I left for something while you were playing that, and when I came back, you just kept talking about it, and it was one of those things that like. It seemed very like frustrating or traumatic or something like that. The way you talked about it, like it really seemed to linger with you.
It still does. I will say this. This is where I do my first little cheap plug of myself. My playthrough of Squirrel Stapler is actually on my YouTube channel. I got it and I believe my playthrough of Sucker for Love and To the End of Days. I don't think I got all of them from Dread X2 on there yet. My goal is to actually go back and do a playthrough of each individual Dread X mini game and do a whole series on them. But then moving on to 3, I'll be 100% honest. 3, I believe, was kind of the weakest entry of the series, both in the narrative driver and in game selection. There were a bunch of them that didn't click. However, one of my favorites in the whole series of games was in it, and there were 2 that actually stood out. One of them was, again, another Torpilduke game called Chips Tips. It was like a play on Blue's Clues. Things get really weird, and it's like photorealistic, or not even photorealistic. It's literally like him in front of a green screen in the game, and it was pretty good. It was funny. It was really funny.
Mm-hmm.
But it had the horror element, so it was really good. The other one was called Submission. Now, Submission is a very well done game. I want to say Corpse Pile made Submission, and they knocked it out of the park with this one. Because Submission, you actually are sitting there doing some minor like programming to build a game for DreadX3. You're playing like the role of the dev and you're trying to make this game, but then things start getting weird. You start plugging things into different places. Stuff starts getting weird. One of the biggest jump scare moments of any of them happens to me in that game. And it was something special. So DreadX3 as a whole was a little underwhelming in some parts, but I would still recommend it just on the sheer power of how good Chips, Tips, and Submission were. And then the hunt was something great, man. So it's hard to really pick any specific game or even two specific games, but if I had to, two of them that really stood out was Rows of Meat, which was made by Mr. Pink, I believe is the name of the dev for that one. And Rows of Meat was this really strange one where you go around like beating things with like this hunk of flesh. Like everything's just made of like flesh, and it's just really odd, and it's like a bad acid trip. There's this giant head that comes out the sky named Dick, and he's something else.
Is he a dick?
He was a dick. Yeah. There's actually a clip somewhere of me going, God, Dick, put a bell on, man, or something, because he just like he'll show up out of nowhere, and he comes like his head just comes from the sky, so he's like out of nowhere. So it was one of those. It was kind of like unsettling because everything was just so weird and odd and made strangely and everything. But another one that really stood out to me, this one was something different. So this is the one of DreadX the Hunt that didn't have like an actual like gun that you're trying to shoot stuff or you're not trying to kill anything. I don't know if you remember, there used to be a series called Fatal Frame, where it was like a horror game where you actually went and hunted ghosts with a camera, and it was terrifying back in the day. It was like Silent Hill, but with a camera, like that level of freaky to me.
Oh, jeez.
This one was like that, but it was weird. It was like kind of pleasant, and it was very strange. So like you play this character going to this mall to try to figure out what, like, there's been these reports of this haunting, and all you go in there with is your camera. And there are these little remnant spirit things that when you touch them, they send you back in time. There's something about this place. I think that's what they call it, is the Axis Mundi, because there's something special about where this mall is placed that allows you to experience things from different times. So like the first one you click, you go back a few years, and you have to take pictures of these ghosts to essentially get rid of them. And some of them attack you, they can kill you and things like that. And then there's this whole story built out. Axis Mundi really did make it was crazy because it was a short game, but it seemed like it covered a lot without rushing. It was very, very unique. Axis Mundi is amazing. Now, on DreadX the Hunt, cheap plug number 2, I do have a playthrough of every single game on there on my YouTube. So if you want to check out just some playthrough of the games and see if it's at least something you might be interested in, you can head over to my YouTube and check those out. But I highly recommend the game. I did leave the meta narrative out of it. That way there's still something left to the imagination if you do decide to play them as well. So I'd say, yeah, that's like 2 from each one that kind of stood out to me for different reasons.
Now, I will say, I think Metamundi, or what was the one you just said?
Axis Mundi.
Axis Mundi. I don't know why I said. Oh, because you said meta. Okay. My brain's crossing wires. Okay, so Axis Mundi, you said it was a short game, but it kind of covered a lot. So would you say that it would make a good full-length game? Because some of the DreadX collections have been made into full-length games.
Yeah, some of the games have. And I would say Axis Mundi, there's a lot you could probably expound or expand upon within that game. Like you could turn it into a full-length thing because it was so just well done and so interesting how they were like bonus objectives you could do. Like they really did a great job with it. But yeah. So DreadX they don't just publish the collections anymore. They actually have started turning some of the games from the collections into full-length games. And then some they've actually started making that are just brand new games. But 2 of the ones that they've actually turned into full-length games, one of them is Sucker for Love, the Cthulhu dating sim. They expanded on it, added some other eldritch horrors that you can date, and all kinds of stuff. I would like to go into a little bit more of that one next week. But another one they did was Spookware. In DreadX 3, this was actually another decent one from DreadX 3. It was called Spookware at the Video Store. And the easiest way to describe this is it was like WarioWare, just with horror themes. That was it. It was a really fun game, little quick, rapid fire, little mini game things. It was just like WarioWare with horror elements, and they actually managed to turn that into a full-length game with like a whole storyline. You actually have to go like exploring the school kind of thing. It's really interesting, and they have 2 games coming that are full-length games that actually aren't within the DreadX collections themselves. And one of them's called My Friendly Neighborhood, and this is by John Szymanski, which I believe is David's brother, and he's also contributed to the DreadX collections in the past. I know he did Charlotte's Exile in DreadX 1, and I believe he was involved in a couple of others later down the road. He made this one. It's called My Friendly Neighborhood. It looks like Ernie from Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street, and a bunch of other like puppet type things that are chasing you. Kind of gives a bit of a Five Nights kind of vibe because you're getting chased by these giant animatronic versions of these children's show things, but it's a lot more like Sesame Street. And then the other one is called Dread Delusion. Now, I haven't looked too much into Dread Delusion yet myself, but I've been kind of keeping an eye on it on Twitter, and it is going to have a massive like world built into it, and it looks like it's going to be really interesting, and it still has that like old school like PS1, PS2 style aesthetic, which a lot of games within these DreadX collections have. So they're kind of carrying that same style over, even though the game has nothing to do with any of the collections.
Yeah. Yeah, and as another shameless plug for you, wasn't Happy Humble's Burger Farm part of the DreadX collections originally?
Actually, it wasn't. Scythe Dev Team has Scythe Dev Team has contributed to quite a bit of them. And Happy's Humble Burger Barn, which is the prequel, that it was free on itch, and then Tiny Build actually picked it up to publish the bigger Burger Farm. Yeah, but Scythe that dev team has had a hand in quite a bit of the DreadX collections.
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought I was under the impression, I wrote in my notes that was a part of that was a part of the DreadX collection.
Well, so there's a lot of these get tied together because a personal like a friend of mine that I've met because of the DreadX collection, his name's Cody Reeder, he goes by Phantom Sloth. He had a part in the Diving Bell, which was one of the games within the DreadX collection too, and it was another really good one. And he actually also worked on Happy's Humble Burger Farm. So it's like there's a lot of these devs that have worked within the DreadX collections that worked on Happy's Humble as well. So there's a lot of mixing going on there.
Oh, okay. That's where I was tying that together. It was through him.
Yeah, it's a small world.
So absolutely. At least probably in the indie devs and stuff like that, once you start to stir that pot, there's not a ton of people that are outsiders or not connected to someone somehow. So do you know anything about the upcoming DreadX collection? Do you know like a theme or have any ideas of what's going into it?
Yeah, the theme I know is party. It's party. It's like a celebration. I know a lot of them have to do with like places like a Chuck E. Cheese or something like that, but the whole thing is like based around partying. And I noticed there was a clown in the logos, so I was like, man, there could be something special hidden in this for me. But yeah, DreadX 5 is going to be all party centric. And the one thing I don't know is, does it tie into previous games, or is it part of a whole brand new narrative? Because I don't know if like 4 or The Hunt doing what it did, if that's just going to break it up and they're going to be individual moving forward, or if it was just a break and they're going to continue the narrative. But I feel like if I remember correctly, in 3 they kind of wrapped up everything that they were trying to make with the first 3. So maybe they start a whole new one. Like that would be cool.
Yeah.
Like a new series of like,
it's like just do like keep doing trilogies on them or something.
Yeah.
So maybe this one's kind of tied to The Hunt.
Yeah, or even if they like break it with The Hunt and then do another trilogy and then do one special and then a trilogy or something along those lines, that would be kind of neat too. But we'll find out pretty soon. Because I'll be getting my hands on that day one because I have to.
Yeah, you're gonna be streaming it day one?
Yeah,
Twitch.tv Rev Sven.
Yep, twitch.tv / Rev Sven. Yeah, I'll be streaming that day one.
Twitch.tv. So I guess after this episode, it'll be tomorrow when that launches, or when you'll be streaming that.
Yeah, I believe that was the last time I checked. I know it was originally supposed to come out in April, and then they had to push it back because there were a few things that weren't quite ready. And the last I had checked, May 3rd, I believe was the launch date. So it does still remain to be seen. We'll see. I'll look into it and if I'm wrong, it'll be in the description below. Be like, Rev was an idiot. This is what day it really comes out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything else to talk about as far as DreadX or anything like that?
DreadX specifically, no. I would like to take a minute to actually like discuss my top 5 that I have from like the collections overall, like what I feel.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, like the 5 best are,
Mm-hmm.
and why. Like the reasons why too, because it's like it's easy just to say, oh well, these are my top 5, but I actually do have reasons behind them, and so I would like to kick it off with like number 5 is Carthink, and it's because it's actually like a really fast-paced, stressful game that really makes you like have to sweat and pay attention while you're getting chased by these little like skeletal monster things that are chasing you. And it has a really great story revolving around like Egyptian. It's not really a mythology. It's more like a hidden Egyptian thing that nobody knew about, like a secret history type of thing. And then number 4, I actually probably go with Sucker for Love, just because it threw me off, because like I was expecting horror games, and then Sucker for Love comes out and it's like a full on like anime looking dating sim, but it was really funny, and I also really enjoyed the expanded version of the game. It was a lot of fun. It was clever. The voice acting was really funny and good. It was an all around fun experience. Number 3 has
Sucker for Love was definitely a funny experience, because I saw you play that in the DreadX collection. And it was kind of a funny experience because it started off looking like it was gonna be really scary, and then it just became like very ooh woo, like anime looking stuff. I was like, oh,
yeah,
and it was
because
just
like when it first shows
it
her,
went from like scary to really cute real quick, and it's just like, oh,
yeah,
okay, this is what we're doing.
yeah, because when you summon Lynetta, she's got this big, tall, towering, like shadowy figure and everything, and she's like, ask something about what do you desire, mortal, or something, and you just go, I want to smooch you, and that's when she goes, what, and everything gets like real cutesy. So yeah, Sucker for Love is definitely in the top 5. But number 3, I have to go with Access Mundi. Just because again, it kind of like it still kept the horror elements by having ghosts and a few jump scares and everything. But there was just something about the way it built itself that it was really well done, and it was a genuine like pleasure to play it. Like I remember playing that, and when I was done, I went, wow, that was just nice. I really liked that. Number 2, Submission, because it was very, very clever. I'd never played a horror game like that. One that basically you're programming, you're like actually coding and stuff yourself into this horror game, and it had some of the better jump scares that didn't really feel cheap. They felt very well placed. And number 1, this is going to come to a surprise to a lot of people that know me, but because of its everlasting effect on me, my life, and my misery, it's going to be Squirrel Stapler. But I actually want to take a second to mention something that whenever we were discussing, whenever I was playing DreadX The Hunt, there's a game in there called Uktena 64, and it's designed to look exactly like a Nintendo 64 game, and it's obviously a hunting game. And at the very, very beginning of it, there's a sign out in front of this cabin. In front of that sign is the exact same squirrel model that they used for Squirrel Stapler. And if I remember correctly, I may get the title wrong here, but David Zemansky was actually kind of like the leader on the project for The Hunt. So I called him out. I was like, I see that, Zemansky. I see that squirrel. You're not fooling me. I see what's happening here. But yeah, no, Squirrel Stapler, it was kind of one of those that it really had this big moment that got really clipped a lot and memed out among streamers and things. And it ended up causing it to have this really almost like a cult following. At least like people were aware of it. And a lot of people, a lot of people got pulled into DreadX because they heard of Squirrel Stapler. That was actually the first thing that brought me in. I was on Twitter and a bunch of streamers were playing it, and I just keep saying, or seeing people say 2 words, Squirrel Stapler, and Squirrel Stapler, what the, all these things. Just talk. I'm like, what is, I guess I'm playing this game. And I got hooked. I got looped in, and I got hooked, and I've been a DreadX fan ever since. But yeah, that about covers the DreadX collections on what I had, which feels like I actually, there was a lot. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah, no, that was quite a bit, especially for just sticking to one game series. Like, this is our first episode that was really just tailored toward one game, and I feel like there was a lot there.
Yeah, and there's going to be even more to cover in the future. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna want to try to discuss 5 when it drops because, I mean, why wouldn't I? 5's going to be something I'm going to want to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I guess when this airs, our next episode will probably touch, or maybe 2 episodes from now. It'll not the next one because we're pre-recording these, but the one after that we'll probably talk heavily about 5 and kind of the games that are in there.
Yeah, because full disclosure, full transparency on this. There's going to be a couple of weeks where we're not going to be able to record, so we are recording a couple episodes in advance. That's why we're wearing the exact same stuff that we wore in last week's episode.
I put on a hoodie, so you can't tell.
Ah, man, see, I told them myself, but I made it look different.
No,
I put this here.
It's just cold.
It's like I put this here between episodes, so it looks like it's different.
There you go.
But it's not. Now that this ended up being a little bit of a shorter episode because we did kind of just cover a single topic, a single game series and a game franchise, but it was definitely worth covering. I would also, at some point like to touch up, Dread Central itself, kind of, which is part of like the whole Dread family. They actually have some Dread pictures, and I believe Epic Picture Group works with them a lot and stuff like that. So there's a whole rabbit hole we can go down in future episodes about this outside of just their games as well. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. One of the things, kind of a brief touch on this, I'm pretty sure this little guy was involved. His name's Benny, and he's from a movie called Benny Loves You. He's adorable. But anyways, that'll be for another time. A little teaser for something down the line.
Yeah, when you were talking about the Bert and Ernie type game, the ones that came to mind was or the stuff that came to mind is it was Benny Loves You, and then there was recently that one game that came out where you were kind of in a like a Chuck E. Cheese type thing. And there was the one with the big blue head and the really long arms that were chasing you.
Yeah, Poppy's Playtime, I think. It's either Poppy's Playtime or Poppy's Playhouse. So Huggy Wuggy's his name, the big blue Langley dude that has the big razor sharp teeth when he catches you. Yeah, believe it or not, I haven't touched that game yet. Oh. And the main reason is, I'll be honest, I'll tell you, there's actually a specific reason. It's coming out in parts. And
so you're waiting for it to all be out?
Yeah, or at least further along, because there were a couple of games that I did that with in the past that released like that. And as a content creator, if you're not doing content around it, it's whatever. But as a content creator, whenever you play like an episode 1, and then episode 2 doesn't come out till way later, your options are either any new audience you've built up in that time, they may be left behind, or you have to play it over again. And so the people that have been there before are seeing the same stuff. It happened with Bendy and the Ink Machine, which I didn't actually, it didn't happen to me with Bendy and the Ink Machine because I had played it on Xbox and they didn't release it on Xbox until it was completed. But the other one was My Beautiful Paper Smile, which I would love to get into in a future episode because that game is a beautiful, beautiful game. But yeah, that's why I am gonna wait. Like I'm interested in Poppy's Playtime, I believe is what it is, but until they release the full game, I can't unless I'm not gonna create content around it. You ever had anything happen with like any games you're into?
I don't know. I do play quite a few games that are like pre-release and stuff like that. So like I'll play them before all the content's out, and then they'll release later. But I don't do a whole lot of story-driven stuff, so I don't know that I fall into that category near as much as you do.
That makes sense. But a lot of these games we'll get into and talk on a further day because they're all worth talking about. Like one of the things you're going to hear from me a lot, and this is kind of why we did a DreadX special, is I play a lot of indie horror. Like I do play a lot of indie horror, or have played a lot of indie horror over the years, and so there's going to be a lot more horror content, especially we're celebrating halfway to Halloween when this episode comes out. Closer to Halloween, when October rolls around, I'm going to go all in. So be ready for that. But until next time, we appreciate y'all being here. We appreciate you joining us for this DreadX special. If you have any questions about the DreadX collections or DreadX games in general, and you don't want to talk to the devs for some weird reason, you can always reach out to us on our socials, which of course are all in the descriptions below. We'd love to talk to you about them. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just comment below here, and don't forget to leave us a like and a subscription. You know, it helps us a ton, and we're really making some good progress with this, and it's turning into a lot of fun really fast.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But until next time, I'm Rev. That's Wingles. Have a good one.